Hi, my name is Sikoryak, and today I'm going to be doing a musculoskeletal exam of my brother. Just going to ask for consent. Jake, is it okay that we're going to be doing a musculoskeletal exam on you?
Yes.
And I'm recorded for the class?
Yes.
Great. So beforehand, I'm just going to span the room showing that there's no resources being used when doing this examination. And just noting that. So before I start the exam, I'm just going to note that patient would usually be in a healthcare setting wearing a gown because we're doing a head-to-toe assessment today, and certain parts of the areas are going to be exposed. So starting off, we would do a rapid ABCDE assessment, and next we're going to be checking the head and neck. First things first, we're going to be checking for TMJ. So I'm going to note that the patient, both sides of his jaw and his joint are not inflamed, no swelling, no redness or tenderness, no heat. When to the touch, I'm just going to make sure that all of his joints work. So if you can open your mouth up and down, and then side to side, please. And then if you can just move your jaw forward for me, and then just do that same motion again, closed. There you go. So I just noted that there was nothing wrong with his joint and TMJ going on. So next, I'm going to be checking the cervical, the neck, and the head. I'm just going to make sure that the head and neck are erect. If you can look up for me. I'm just noting that there's no lesions, no inflammation, or no swelling. Noting that there's any pain when to touch. I'm going to be looking at the spinous process and palpating the spinous process. I as well as going to be looking at the sternocleidomastoid muscle and the trapezius muscle, making sure that there's no tenderness when palpating either muscle, and noting that he still has strength, so if you could push forward for me. Great. So then I'm going to check the range of motion in his head, so I'm going to be asking if he can look side to side for me, up and down, and then like this. So there's no problem with his range of motions, and you would know if there's any tenderness, any problems when doing that, and no stiffness or anything when he did that. So there's no stiffness, correct, when you're doing that?
No.
Okay, great. So next I'm going to be doing a couple of assessments. So today I'm going to be doing forward flexion and extension for your arm. So I'm just going to be holding, and I'm going to ask you to move the hand up like this, flexion, and then down like this. And then I would check that bilaterally, and you could do the same stuff on this side. Just move up with me and down. So I would do that with him, making sure that he was doing it correctly. And then I'm going to ask him to reach up to the back as much as he can, like that. And then the other side for me, please. Great. So next I'm going to be doing abduction and adduction. For this, I'm going to be checking if he can move his hands up and then down. Just noting if there was any discrepancy, if he was feeling any pain and the muscles are working properly there. And then I'm going to ask you to push against me, making sure that the strength is there, and I push away from me, and do that again for me, push against me. Okay, great. So the muscles are intact, and then I'm going to ask you to put your hands behind your, and then I'm looking at the elbows, looking for flexion of the elbows, making sure that they're normal, and he could still do all those ranges of motions. So after that, I'm going to be looking at the elbows as well. Sorry, it's just recording, so yeah. I'm just going to be looking at the elbows, looking at the color. I'm going to be looking at both sides of the elbows. If there's any stiffness in the elbows, I'm going to be checking that as well, noting anything. So then I'm going to be looking at the range of motions of the biceps and like that, and I'm going to ask him if he can go like this, and then going like this, and then the same thing with the other hand, noting any problems with that. So once I do that, I'm going to be asking him to curl, and then I'm going to making sure that there's strength when he's bending and straightening his arm. Oops, sorry. And then I'm going to be asking to resist against me, so go like this again. Yep, okay. Now after that, I'm going to be looking at his wrist and his hands. I'm just going to be looking at his hands, making sure that there's no redness, no swelling, no lesions in his hands, that you can move his hands freely. Now the other side, I'm going to be looking at the dorsal and palmar signs of his wrist. I'm going to be making sure there's no tenderness, that I can palpate his joints and his fingers, making sure there's no discrepancies, no anything like that, no joint pain when he's doing that. So then I'm just going to ask him to move his wrists up and down. And then abduction, adduction, so like this. And if you could spread your wrist out like this. Good. So if he wasn't going to be able to do that, then there could be a problem with one of his joints in his wrists or his fingers or in his hands. So after that, I'm going to ask him to, I did abduction and adduction, spread the fingers. So now I'm going to be checking for muscle strength. So I'm going to ask you to hold my fingers like,
Oh, hold them?
yep, and push, making sure there's strength. So push and then squeeze tightly, making sure. Now do it on the other hand.
Oh.
And no, other hand. Yep, good. Now I'm just going to make sure that he has good strength in both of his hands. So after that, I'm going to be checking for carpal tunnel syndrome. Carpal tunnel syndrome is very common and could get more severe as the patient ages. So to check for carpal tunnel syndrome, we're going to have him go like this. Then you're going to go like this. And then the patient, if he could not hold it for 60 seconds and was feeling numbness, tinglingness, or pain, that could be a definite sign of carpal tunnel syndrome. And this is very important. It's called the Playlands test. And it's very important to make sure you test for carpal tunnel syndrome. So another test you can do, you can let go. Another test you can do is you're going to be looking at the nerve, and you're going to be palpating, and if there was any tingliness or pain, or he would be in excruciating pain, that is another sign of carpal tunnel syndrome, and that's the Tinel sign, and it's percussion of the medial nerve on the wrist. So after we did that, we're going to move down a little bit, and we're going to be looking at the hip joint. So there's a couple of tests that you can do for the hip joint. So you just want to look at the hip. You want to look in, just going to make sure that both of the sides are symmetric. There's no tenderness. There was no pain when I touched it on your hips. No. So there's a couple tests to do to check the hips. So I'm just going to ask you to go like this for me, and then bring your knees to your chest. Go like that. Then we're going to do abduction, adduction. So bring your legs in like that. And then if you could put them out like scissors. Good. And there's no pain or anything when you did that?
No.
Okay, perfect. So the ranges of motion are normal. And then I'd have him push against me on his legs. And I could check like that. I want to check his quadricep muscles and his reflex, making sure that there's no pain or tenderness or atrophy when I'm looking at his quadricep muscles, which there is not. Next, I'm going to be looking at the ankle joints and the ankles in the foot. So I would ask him to take his socks off. You don't have to take your socks off. I'd be looking at his fingers, his toes, his ankles. I'm looking for atrophy, stiffness, swelling, inflammation, or pain when I would palpate. And there's no pain when I palpate? No. And then I'm going to ask you to flex. I'm going to do the plantar reflex. So if you could flex and point your toes and flex like that, and then put them straight up. And if you could see, I don't know if you saw that, but if you saw that, show that there's no problem with him doing either of those steps. Next, I'm going to ask him to push against my feet like a gas pedal, and I'm checking for muscle strength. Good. You're strong. And then just showing that he has range of motion in his ankles and foot as well. So next I'm going to ask the patient to stand up for me, because I'm going to be looking at the back of his spine. So if you could turn around, I'll just move this up a little bit. So I'm going to be looking at his spine. I'm just going to make sure that the invisible vertical line, making sure that's line, no signs of scoliosis or anything. Then I palpate for the spinous process. Palpate down, making sure there's no pain, tenderness, or you don't feel any masses or anything like that. And since he's standing, I'm going to ask him to do a couple of tests after I palpate his spinous process. So I'm just going to ask him if you could touch your toes for me, please. Just stand there. Should be 75 to 90 degree angle. And then if I could stand up for me. Now I'm going to ask you to do a couple things. I'm just going to ask you to move like this. So I'm going to ask you to twist a little bit and then move side to side. And I'm going to lean. And if you had any problems with that, so there could be problems with the muscles or anything like that. And then I'm just going to ask you to twist, make sure your hips have good range of motion. So after that, you can sit down again. That's all the steps that we could do, making sure that you palpate everything that's included in the musculoskeletal system, know any discrepancies, or if you had any facial demeanor, if you were doing any of those. And if you had any questions, you would notify anyone and call a healthcare provider, and just wrap up the exam, hand hygiene, and do anything like that. Thank you.